Sarah Martinez had been walking the dusty roads of Northern California for 3 days straight. Her worn-out sneakers had holes that let in every pebble and grain of sand. The small backpack on her shoulders contained everything she owned now: a water bottle, some crackers, a change of clothes, and $47 in crumpled bills. The divorce papers in her back pocket felt heavier than anything else she carried. 23 years of marriage had ended when she discovered her husband's secret gambling addiction had cost them their house, their savings, and their future. The bank had taken everything. Her grown children lived across the country, building their own lives, unaware that their mother was now homeless and walking aimlessly through unfamiliar territory. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she approached what looked like a small reservation community. Modest houses dotted the landscape, and she could see children playing in dusty yards. Her throat felt like sandpaper and her legs shook with exhaustion. She had been rationing her water, but the bottle was nearly empty now. As she stumbled slightly, catching herself against a wooden fence post, Sarah wondered if this was how her story would end. At 51 years old, she felt ancient and invisible. The world seemed to have no place for a middle-aged woman with no money, no home, and no clear direction. She had always been someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's employee. Now she was nobody, walking toward nowhere. The children playing nearby had stopped their games and were watching her with curious eyes. She tried to smile and wave, not wanting to frighten them, but she probably looked like a mess. Her graying hair hung limp and unwashed, and her clothes were dusty from the road. She must have looked like exactly what she was: a woman who had lost everything and was barely hanging on. In the distance, she could see what appeared to be a small community center or gathering place. Smoke rose from somewhere behind the buildings, and she caught the scent of cooking food that made her empty stomach clench with hunger. She hadn't eaten anything substantial in 2 days, surviving on the last of her crackers and whatever kindness she encountered along the way. But kindness had been scarce. People in the small towns she'd passed through had looked at her with suspicion or pity, and she had felt too proud to ask for help. Now, however, pride seemed like a luxury she could no longer afford. She needed water, food, and somewhere to rest, even if it was just for a few hours. As she approached the edge of the community, Sarah felt tears threatening to fall. She had always been strong, always been the one others leaned on. She had raised 3 children, worked multiple jobs, and kept her family together through difficult times. But this felt different. This felt like the end of her rope, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to tie a knot and hang on. The late afternoon shadows were growing longer, and she knew she needed to find shelter before dark. She had spent the previous night sleeping under a bridge, listening to trucks rumble overhead and praying no one would find her there. The thought of another night like that made her feel sick with dread. She paused at what seemed to be the main road through the small community, trying to gather the courage to approach someone for help. The houses looked well-maintained despite their modest size, and she could see gardens and children's toys in the yards. This was clearly a place where families lived and cared for each other. She wondered if they would have any compassion left over for a stranger who had lost her way. Taking a deep breath, Sarah started walking again, her feet aching with every step. She told herself she just needed to make it through today, then tomorrow, then the day after that. Maybe eventually she would figure out how to rebuild her life from nothing, but right now all she needed was water and a safe place to rest. The small boy appeared from behind a cluster of sage bushes as if he had materialized from the earth itself. Sarah estimated he was maybe 8 or 9 years old, with dark hair that caught the sunlight and eyes that seemed far too serious for his young face. He wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, but what caught her attention immediately was the intricately carved wooden bow he held in his small hands. "Are you lost?" the boy asked, his voice barely above a whisper. There was something gentle in his tone, a kindness that made Sarah's eyes fill with tears she had been holding back for days. Sarah stopped walking and looked down at him, trying to find her voice. "I think I might be," she admitted, her words coming out raspy from thirst and exhaustion. "I'm sorry if I'm not supposed to be here. I was just looking for some water." The boy studied her face with an intensity that seemed beyond his years. He tilted his head slightly, and she noticed he had a small scar above his left eyebrow that gave him a distinguished look despite his youth. "My grandmother says people don't get lost by accident," he said thoughtfully. "She says they get lost because they're looking for something they haven't found yet." Something about his words hit Sarah deep in her chest. She had been thinking of herself as lost, as someone who had failed and was now wandering aimlessly. But maybe this child was right. Maybe she wasn't just running from her old life. Maybe she was searching for something new. "What's your name?" Sarah asked, crouching down so she could meet his eyes at his level. Her knees protested the movement, stiff from days of walking. "Tommy," he replied, shifting the bow to one hand and extending the other toward her in a formal handshake. "Tommy Wynn, this is my family's land. Well, it belongs to all of us, but my dad takes care of this part." Sarah shook his small hand, surprised by the firmness of his grip. "I'm Sarah Martinez. Thank you for talking to me, Tommy. Most people have been—" She trailed off, not wanting to burden this child with her adult problems. "Scared?" Tommy finished for her. "People get scared when they don't understand something. My dad says fear makes people forget how to be kind." The wisdom in his words made Sarah wonder about this boy's father. What kind of man raised a child who could speak with such insight and compassion? She found herself curious about Tommy's family, about the community she had stumbled into. "That's a beautiful bow," Sarah said, gesturing toward the carved wood in his hands. "Did you make it?" Tommy's face lit up with pride. "My dad helped me. He's teaching me the old ways, the traditions of our people. The Modoc have always been hunters and protectors. Dad says knowing how to make a bow connects us to our ancestors." Sarah had heard of the Modoc tribe, but knew little about their history or culture. She found herself genuinely interested in learning more, grateful for this distraction from her own troubles. "Are you a good archer?" "I'm getting better," Tommy said with the honest assessment of a child. "Dad says patience is the most important part. You have to wait for the right moment. And you have to believe in yourself even when you miss the target." His words seemed to carry deeper meaning, and Sarah wondered if he was talking about more than just archery. She was about to respond when she noticed movement from one of the nearby houses. A woman appeared on the front porch, shading her eyes with her hand as she looked in their direction. "That's my grandmother," Tommy said, following her gaze. "She probably wants to make sure you're okay. She worries about people." The woman began walking toward them, and Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness. She was very aware of how she must look, dirty, tired, and desperate. She hoped Tommy's grandmother wouldn't see her as a threat or a burden. "Don't worry," Tommy said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Grandmother always says our doors are open to people who need help. It's part of who we are." As the woman approached, Sarah could see she was probably in her 70s, with silver-streaked hair braided down her back and a face lined with years of laughter and worry. She moved with purpose but without hurry, and her expression was one of concern rather than suspicion. "Tommy," the woman called out when she was close enough to speak without shouting. "Who's your new friend?" "This is Sarah, grandmother. She's been walking for a long time and needs some water." The grandmother's eyes met Sarah's, and in that moment, Sarah felt truly seen for the first time in months. Not judged, not pitied, but simply acknowledged as a human being who needed help. Tommy's grandmother introduced herself as Elena Wynn, and within minutes, Sarah found herself sitting at a worn wooden table in Elena's kitchen, drinking the coolest, most refreshing water she had tasted in days. The house was small but felt warm and lived in, with family photographs covering most surfaces and the lingering scent of herbs and bread in the air. "You eat," Elena said firmly, placing a plate of stew and fresh bread in front of Sarah. "We talk after." Sarah wanted to protest, to say she couldn't accept such kindness from strangers, but her empty stomach overruled her pride. She ate slowly at first, trying to maintain some dignity, but soon found herself devouring the meal with desperate hunger. Elena and Tommy watched without judgment, occasionally exchanging words in what Sarah assumed was their native language. "My grandson says you've been walking for days," Elena said when Sarah finally pushed the empty plate away. "Where are you headed?" Sarah felt her throat tighten. The honest answer was that she had no destination, no plan, no idea what came next. "I'm not really sure," she admitted. "I lost my home recently. My husband and I divorced, and there were financial problems. I guess I'm just trying to figure out what to do next." Elena nodded thoughtfully, as if she had heard similar stories before. "Sometimes we have to lose everything to find out who we really are," she said. "The Modoc people know about losing homes. We were forced from our ancestral lands many times, but we learned that home isn't just a place. It's the people who care about you." Tommy had been quietly listening, still holding his carved bow. Now he spoke up. "Where are your children?" Don't you have a family? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I have 3 grown children, but they live far away. They have their own families now, their own problems. I didn't want to burden them with mine. Family isn't a burden, Elena said gently, but I understand pride. Sometimes we think we're protecting people by carrying our troubles alone. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah found herself sharing more of her story than she had intended. She told them about the 23 years of marriage that had ended in betrayal and financial ruin. She talked about feeling invisible and useless, about walking for days because she couldn't figure out what else to do. Elena listened without offering quick solutions or empty reassurances.
Instead, she shared her own stories. About her late husband who had struggled with alcohol.
About raising her son as a single mother. About the times when the community had pulled together to help families in crisis. My dad works at the community center, Tommy said during a lull in the conversation. He helps people find jobs and houses and stuff. Maybe he could help you too. Elena smiled at her grandson. Your father has a good heart like his son, but he's been working late every day this week. There's been a lot of need in the community lately. Sarah learned that Tommy's father, Marcus, was some kind of social worker or community coordinator. Elena explained that he had grown up on the reservation, left for college and social work training, then returned to help his people. She spoke of him with obvious pride but also with concern. He works too hard, Elena said, shaking her head, always putting everyone else's needs before his own. I worry about him. Is Tommy's mother? Sarah began, then stopped, realizing the question might be too personal. She died when Tommy was 4, Elena said matter-of-factly. Cancer. Marcus has been raising Tommy alone since then, with help from the community. It's been hard on both of them. Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for this family that had welcomed her so warmly despite their own losses and struggles. She looked at Tommy, who was now carefully inspecting his bow, and marveled at his maturity and kindness. Clearly, his father was doing something right in raising him. As evening approached, Elena insisted that Sarah stay for dinner and spend the night on their couch. It's not safe for a woman to sleep outside around here, she said. There are wild animals and sometimes people who mean harm. Sarah wanted to refuse, not wanting to impose further, but Elena's tone brooked no argument. Instead, Sarah helped prepare dinner, grateful to have something useful to do with her hands. She chopped vegetables while Elena seasoned meat, and Tommy set the table with careful precision. Dad should be home soon, Tommy announced, checking the clock on the wall. He always tries to be back before dark. As if summoned by his words, they heard the sound of a truck pulling into the driveway. Tommy immediately perked up, his face brightening with excitement. Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness at the prospect of meeting the man who had clearly had such a positive influence on this remarkable child. Through the window, she could see a tall figure getting out of a pickup truck, moving with the tired gait of someone who had worked a long day. In a few moments, she would meet Marcus Wynne, and something told her this encounter would be important in ways she couldn't yet understand. Marcus Wynne stepped through the front door just as Elena was calling everyone to dinner. Sarah's first impression was of someone who carried himself with quiet strength, tall and lean, with weathered hands that spoke of both physical work and gentle care. His dark hair was starting to show gray at the temples, and when he smiled at Tommy, the tiredness in his eyes softened completely. Dad. Tommy jumped up from his chair and ran to hug his father. We have a visitor. This is Sarah. Grandmother made extra stew. Marcus looked over Tommy's head at Sarah, and she felt suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. She had cleaned up as best she could in Elena's bathroom, but she was still wearing the same dusty clothes she had walked in. Welcome, Marcus said simply, his voice warm but careful. I'm Marcus. I hope my family has been taking good care of you. They've been incredibly kind, Sarah replied, standing awkwardly by the table. I don't want to intrude on your family dinner. I could wait outside or... Nonsense, Elena said firmly. Marcus, wash up. Sarah, sit down. Food gets cold when people stand around being polite. Throughout dinner, Sarah found herself studying Marcus when she thought he wasn't looking. He listened attentively as Tommy chattered about his day, asked thoughtful questions about the boys' archery practice, and showed genuine interest in his son's small adventures. When Elena mentioned finding Sarah on the road, Marcus didn't pry or ask invasive questions. Instead, he simply acknowledged that traveling could be difficult and hoped she was finding what she needed. Dad, Tommy said suddenly, putting down his spoon. Sarah doesn't have anywhere to go. Her husband was mean to her and she lost her house. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment at Tommy's blunt summary of her situation. Tommy, it's more complicated than that. Is it? The boy asked innocently. You said you don't have a home anymore, and you said your husband lied to you about money. That sounds mean to me. Marcus placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. Tommy, sometimes grown-up problems are hard to explain even when you're trying to help. But we could help her, couldn't we? Tommy persisted. We helped Mrs. Johnson when her husband left. And we helped the Ramirez family when their house burned down. Sarah could see Elena and Marcus exchanging glances across the table. She sensed there was a conversation happening between them that she wasn't privy to. Some family communication that went beyond words. Sarah, Marcus said carefully, if you don't mind me asking, do you have any plans? Family you're trying to reach, maybe? Sarah set down her fork. Her appetite suddenly gone despite the delicious meal. Honestly, no, I've been walking because I didn't know what else to do. I have some money, but not enough for a motel room more than a few nights, and I have no idea where I'm going. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it felt heavy with possibility. Sarah could almost see Marcus thinking, weighing options and responsibilities in his mind. There's a women's shelter in Klamath Falls, he said finally. It's about 40 miles from here. They help women get back on their feet. Job training, temporary housing, counseling if you need it. I could drive you there tomorrow if you'd like. Sarah felt a mix of gratitude and disappointment. The offer was practical and kind, but it also felt like a polite way of moving her along. She understood, of course. These people had their own lives and problems. They couldn't be expected to take in every stray who wandered into their community. That's very generous, she said. I appreciate everything you've all done for me already. Or, Tommy said suddenly, his voice bright with an idea that had just occurred to him, she could stay here and help us. Grandmother gets tired doing all the cooking and cleaning. And Dad, you're always saying you need more help at the community center. Tommy, Marcus began, but his son wasn't finished. And I could teach her about our culture, and she could teach me about where she comes from. It would be like having a cultural exchange except in our own house. Elena chuckled at her grandson's enthusiasm. You make it sound very official, Tommy. Well, it could be, Tommy said seriously. Dad always says we should help people who need help. And Sarah needs help. Sarah felt tears threatening again. This child's simple, direct kindness was almost too much to bear. Tommy, that's a beautiful idea, but your father is right to suggest the shelter. You don't really know me. I could be... She struggled to find the right words. I could be trouble. Tommy looked at her with that serious expression she was beginning to recognize. Are you trouble? No, I don't think so, but... Then you're not trouble, Tommy concluded with the absolute logic of childhood. Dad, what do you think? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, clearly torn between caution and compassion. Sarah could see him looking at his son, then at his mother, then at her. When he finally spoke, his words surprised everyone at the table. What kind of work experience do you have, Sarah? Sarah felt her heart skip a beat at Marcus's question. For the first time in weeks, someone was asking about her skills rather than her problems. I was a nurse for 15 years before I had children, she said, her voice growing stronger as she talked about something she knew well. After that, I managed the office for my husband's construction business. I did the books, handled insurance claims, managed schedules, dealt with suppliers and customers. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his interest clearly genuine. A nurse. That's something we desperately need around here. The clinic in town has been struggling to stay staffed, and we have a lot of elderly community members who need regular care. I haven't worked as a nurse in over 20 years, Sarah cautioned. My license probably isn't even valid anymore. Licenses can be renewed, Elena said quietly. Skills don't disappear just because time passes. Tommy was looking back and forth between the adults, sensing that something important was happening. Does this mean Sarah could stay? Marcus held up a hand. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Sarah, what I'm thinking is this. We do have a genuine need for help in our community. Not just medical care, but administrative support, grant writing, program coordination. If you were interested in staying for a while, there might be ways for you to earn some money while you figure out your next steps. Sarah felt a flutter of hope mixed with fear. The idea of having purpose again, of using her skills to help people, was incredibly appealing, but she had learned to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. Where would I live? She asked practically. I can't impose on your family indefinitely. There's a small apartment above the community center, Marcus explained. It's not fancy, but it's clean and private. We've been using it for storage, but it has a kitchenette and a bathroom. It was built for exactly this kind of situation. Temporary housing for people who are helping the community. Elena nodded. We could have it cleaned up and ready in a day or two. It would give you time to decide if this is really what you want. What would you want from me in return? Sarah asked, still cautious. I mean, specifically. Marcus thought for a moment. Well, like I said, we need medical support. Even if you can't practice as a nurse right away, you could help people navigate health services, teach basic first aid, maybe assist the doctor when he comes through twice a month. And honestly, we're drowning in paperwork at the community center, grant applications, government forms, correspondence with tribal officials. Someone with office management experience would be invaluable. Tommy had been listening intently, and now he spoke up with the directness that seemed to be his trademark. Dad, if Sarah stayed, would that make her part of our family? The question hung in the air, and Sarah could see Marcus struggling with how to answer it. Elena came to his rescue. Tommy, family isn't just about living in the same place, she said gently, but people who help each other, who care about each other. They become family in different ways. Like how Mrs. Rodriguez isn't our blood relative, but we call her Aunt Maria because she helped take care of you when your mama died? Tommy asked. Exactly like that, Elena confirmed. Sarah felt something loosening in her chest. For months she had felt completely alone in the world. The idea that she could build new connections, find a new purpose, maybe even discover a new kind of family, was both terrifying and exhilarating. I don't want charity, she said firmly. If I stay, I want to earn my keep. I want to contribute something meaningful. That's exactly what we need, Marcus assured her. Someone who wants to work, who wants to be part of the solution. We've had volunteers come and go, people who wanted to feel good about helping but didn't want to do the hard work. That's not what we're talking about here. How long would this arrangement be for? Sarah asked. Marcus shrugged. As long as it works for everyone involved. Maybe a few months while you get back on your feet. Maybe longer if you find you like it here and we find we can't do without you. Tommy suddenly jumped up from his chair. I have an idea. Dad, remember how you always said you wanted to learn more about other cultures? Well, Sarah could teach us about Mexican traditions, and we could teach her about Modoc culture. It would be like that student exchange program you told me about, except everybody gets to stay home. Sarah smiled at Tommy's enthusiasm. Actually, my family is from New Mexico originally. My grandmother was half Navajo. I grew up hearing some of the old stories, though I'm afraid I've forgotten a lot of them. Elena's eyes lit up with interest. Native blood calls to native blood, she said. Maybe you finding us wasn't an accident after all. Marcus was studying Sarah's face with new interest. You never mentioned that. It never seemed relevant, Sarah said. My grandmother died when I was 12, and my family moved away from New Mexico when I was 15. I lost touch with that part of my heritage. Maybe this is your chance to reconnect with it, Elena suggested. Different tribes, but many of the same struggles, many of the same values. Tommy was practically bouncing with excitement now. This is perfect. Sarah, you have to stay, please. Sarah looked around the table at these three people who had shown her more kindness in one day than she had experienced in months. The offer seemed almost too good to be true, but maybe, just maybe, that was because she had forgotten what true kindness looked like. Could I think about it tonight? She asked. This is a big decision, and I want to make sure I'm thinking clearly. Of course, Marcus said. Take all the time you need. That night, Sarah lay on Elena's comfortable couch, staring at the ceiling and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the small community settling into sleep. Through the thin walls, she could hear the murmur of Marcus and Elena talking quietly in the kitchen, though she couldn't make out their words. She wondered if they were discussing her, weighing the risks and benefits of bringing a stranger into their lives. She thought about her children, scattered across the country, probably unaware that their mother was homeless and desperate. Part of her felt she should call them, ask for help. But the shame of her situation felt overwhelming. They knew about the divorce, but they didn't know about the extent of the financial devastation. They didn't know she had been walking for days with nowhere to go. The offer to stay here, to work and contribute to this community, felt like a lifeline. But Sarah had learned to be wary of things that seemed too good to be true. What if she wasn't as capable as she remembered? What if her nursing skills were too rusty to be useful? What if the community didn't accept an outsider, regardless of what Marcus thought they needed? She dozed fitfully and woke before dawn to the sound of Marcus moving quietly around the kitchen, trying not to wake anyone as he prepared for another early day at work. Through the window she could see Tommy in the backyard, practicing with his bow in the pale morning light. The boy moved with focused concentration, drawing the string back, holding his position for a moment, then releasing. She couldn't see if he was hitting his target, but she admired his dedication. Elena emerged from her bedroom and found Sarah sitting up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked kindly. "Too much to think about," Sarah admitted. "Elena, can I ask you something? Why are you all being so kind to me? You don't know anything about me except what I've told you." Elena settled into her rocking chair with a cup of coffee. Tommy's grandfather used to say that people reveal their true nature in how they treat their animals and how they respond to unexpected kindness. Yesterday, when Tommy offered you water, you cried. When I fed you, you tried to refuse. When Marcus offered you work instead of charity, you insisted on earning your keep. These things tell me about your character. But what if I disappoint you? What if I can't do the work you need? Then we'll figure something else out, Elena said simply. But what if you exceed our expectations? What if this turns out to be exactly what all of us needed? Marcus appeared in the doorway, dressed for work but moving quietly. "Good morning," he said softly. "Sarah, I hope we didn't pressure you too much last night. I want you to know that whatever you decide is fine. If you'd prefer to go to the shelter in Klamath Falls, I'll still drive you there." Sarah looked at this man who had welcomed her into his home despite having every reason to be suspicious. She thought about Tommy's simple wisdom, Elena's quiet strength, and the sense of purpose she had felt when they talked about the work that needed to be done. "I'd like to try it," she said. "If you're really willing to take a chance on me, I'd like to stay and help." Marcus smiled, and Sarah could see the relief in his expression. "I'm glad. I think this could work out well for everyone." Tommy came bounding through the back door, his cheeks flushed from the cool morning air. "Sarah, did you decide? Are you staying?" "I'm going to try," Sarah said, and found herself smiling genuinely for the first time in months. Tommy whooped with joy and threw his arms around her in an enthusiastic hug. "This is going to be so great. I can show you all the best places to walk and teach you about the plants and animals, and you can help me with my reading homework." Over breakfast, they made practical plans. Marcus would show Sarah the apartment above the community center that morning, and if she approved, they would spend the weekend cleaning it up and making it livable. Elena offered to take her shopping for basic necessities, clothes, toiletries, bedding. Tommy volunteered to help move furniture and promised to introduce her to all his friends. "What about my nursing license?" Sarah asked. "How would I go about getting that renewed?" "I have contacts at the state health department," Marcus said. "I can help you navigate the paperwork. It might take a few weeks, but in the meantime, there's plenty of other work you could do." As they finished breakfast and prepared to start the day, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone drowning and grabbing for any floating debris, but the quiet, steady hope of someone who could see a path forward. Tommy appeared at her side with his carved bow. "Sarah," he said, his voice taking on that serious tone she had learned to recognize. "I have something important to ask you." Sarah knelt down to meet his eyes, curious about what could be so important to this thoughtful child. "My dad has been sad for a long time," Tommy said quietly. "He tries to hide it, but I can tell. He works too hard and doesn't smile very much anymore. I think he needs someone to take care of him the way he takes care of everyone else." Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. "Tommy, I'm not sure what you're asking." The boy looked at her with those two wise eyes, clutching his bow tightly. "Will you be my father's wife?" Sarah felt the world stop spinning for a moment. Tommy's question hung in the air between them, innocent and profound at the same time. She could hear Elena's sharp intake of breath from the kitchen, and she was acutely aware that Marcus had frozen in the doorway, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. "Tommy," Sarah said gently, her heart racing, "that's a very big question. Marriage is something that happens when two grown-ups love each other very much and want to build a life together. But you could learn to love each other," Tommy said with the logical confidence of a child who believed all problems had solutions. "Grandmother says love grows when people take care of each other, and Dad needs someone to take care of him. Marcus finally found his voice. Tommy, that's not— You can't just ask someone to marry your father because you think he's lonely. Why not? Tommy asked, genuinely confused. In the old stories grandmother tells me, marriages were arranged by families all the time. They worked out fine. Elena came over and placed a gentle hand on her grandson's shoulder. Tommy, those were different times. These days people choose their own partners. But what if they choose wrong? Tommy persisted. What if they choose someone who lies about money and leaves them walking on roads with holes in their shoes? Sarah felt tears stinging her eyes. This child had been listening more carefully to her story than she had realized, and his innocent desire to protect both her and his father from future heartbreak was almost too much to bear. Tommy, she said softly, your father is a wonderful man and you're an amazing boy. Any woman would be lucky to be part of your family. But I've just come out of a marriage that hurt me very badly. I need time to figure out who I am on my own before I can even think about loving someone new. Tommy considered this seriously. How much time? Despite the awkwardness of the situation, Sarah found herself smiling. I don't know. Maybe a long time. Maybe forever. Some people are better on their own. But not you, Tommy said with certainty. You're sad when you're alone. I can tell. And Dad is sad when he's alone too. Maybe you could be less sad together. Marcus cleared his throat. Tommy, I think we've embarrassed Sarah enough for one morning. Why don't you go practice your archery while Sarah and I look at the apartment? Tommy looked disappointed but obediently headed for the door. At the threshold, he turned back one more time. Just think about it, okay? You don't have to decide today. The drive to the community center was quiet. Both Sarah and Marcus seemingly lost in their own thoughts about Tommy's unexpected proposal. Sarah stared out the window at the landscape, noting details she had missed during her exhausted walk the day before. The land had a stark beauty to it, with rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and the distant mountains creating a dramatic backdrop. I'm sorry about that, Marcus said finally. Tommy has always been direct, but that was sweet, Sarah finished. Inappropriate maybe, but sweet. He loves you very much. He worries about me too much for a kid his age, Marcus said with a sigh. Ever since his mother died, he's felt responsible for taking care of me. I keep telling him that's not his job, but he sees that you're carrying a heavy load, Sarah observed. Kids are more perceptive than we give them credit for. Marcus glanced at her. What about you? Are you really okay with staying here after that awkward conversation? Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering. Marcus, can I ask you something personal? After what just happened, I think we're past worrying about personal boundaries. Do you ever think about remarrying? I mean generally, not because of what Tommy said. Marcus was silent for so long that Sarah wondered if she had overstepped. Finally, he spoke. I love my wife very much. When she died, I thought that was it for me. That I'd had my chance at love and lost it. For a long time, I was just focused on surviving, on raising Tommy, on keeping our lives together. And now, I don't know. Sometimes I think it would be nice to have someone to share things with, someone who understood the challenges of this life. But I also worry about bringing someone new into Tommy's world. He's been through enough loss. They pulled up in front of a modest building that housed the community center. It was larger than Sarah had expected, with what looked like meeting rooms, offices, and recreational space. A wooden sign by the front door listed services in both English and what she assumed was the Modoc language. This is impressive, Sarah said as they got out of the truck. We're proud of it, Marcus said. It took years of grant writing and fundraising, but it's become the heart of our community. We offer everything from job training to elder care to youth programs. He led her around to a side entrance and up a narrow staircase. The apartment is small, he warned as he unlocked the door, but it has everything you'd need. The space was indeed small, a studio layout with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and enough room for a bed, a small table, and a chair. But it was clean and had large windows that let in plenty of natural light. Sarah could see the mountains in the distance and hear children playing in a nearby yard. It's perfect, she said, and meant it. After days of sleeping outside and months of uncertainty, this little space felt like a palace. Really? You're not just being polite? Marcus, 3 days ago I was sleeping under a bridge. This looks like luxury to me. He smiled at that, the first completely relaxed smile she had seen from him. Then let's go tell Tommy the good news. He'll want to start planning your welcome party. As they walked back toward the truck, Sarah felt a strange sense of destiny settling over her. She didn't know what the future held, and she certainly wasn't ready to think about Tommy's surprising suggestion about marriage. But for the first time in months, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "Marcus," she said as they drove back toward Elena's house, "thank you for taking a chance on me, for offering me work instead of charity, for making me feel like I might actually have something valuable to contribute." "Thank you," he replied, "for being willing to stay, for being the kind of person Tommy felt comfortable talking to, for reminding me that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places." When they arrived back at the house, Tommy was waiting anxiously on the front porch. "Well," he called out before they had even gotten out of the truck, "did you like it? Are you staying for sure?" "I'm staying," Sarah confirmed, and Tommy let out a whoop of joy that brought Elena to the door, smiling at her grandson's enthusiasm. As Sarah watched this family celebrate her decision to join their community, she realized that Tommy had been right about one thing. She was less sad when she wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. The future could take care of itself.